Is it wrong to tell kids to apologize? Have you ever, Ron, have you ever had someone apologize and you felt like it wasn't really sincere?
Yes.
How do you, like, what does that make you feel like?
Why did you bother saying it?
Yeah, what's the point?
Yeah. You can usually tell by the tone.
Mm-hmm.
Like with kids, a lot of times it's sorry.
Sorry.
But with adults, they tend to maybe embellish around it, like really basically saying, I'm sorry that you're so dumb that you were offended.
Yeah. Or they add a lot to it where it's like, I have all these excuses as to why it happened.
Yeah.
So I'm
sorry you felt that way.
Mm-hmm.
That one really gets me. Yeah, because then you're apologizing for my feelings, not because of something you did. Daria, what about you? What does it make you feel like?
It really hurts.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels obviously insincere, but it also feels like you don't really care about me.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really care about that I'm hurt by that. It also kind of like makes me a little bit lose a little bit of respect for that person because they can't, they're not really like seeing somebody else's side.
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes me want to be like, okay, I need you to like, I don't know, mature or like do something here to, I would prefer someone not to apologize, to be honest.
Right.
It kind of feels worse that they're apologizing, but they don't mean it. I don't know. That's how it kind of feels. So this is an article from The Atlantic. Is it wrong to tell kids to apologize? Some parents argue that forcing children to say they're sorry is useless or even harmful, but the reality is more nuanced. Ron, how have you seen this with your grandkids? In sibling relationships, we often will want to be like, say you're sorry.
Mm-hmm.
You bonk them in the head with a ball or a bat or something.
Yeah.
You're like, say you're sorry to Billy.
Right. Yeah, we get a lot of that with the grandkids. And you just, like, I try to point out what it is that they did wrong so they know what they're apologizing for. But again, a lot of times it's sorry, and off they go.
Yeah.
But I figure at least they've had that interaction.
Sorry I didn't get another whack in.
Yeah, exactly. Wish I could. At first blush, making a child express remorse would seem an obvious violation of the feelings-informed approach. And then they quote a couple of parent influencers. Telling your children to apologize, the argument goes, is useless, unnecessary, and harmful. Useless because it will produce an empty apology. Unnecessary because there are other, better ways to teach children to make amends. Harmful because, accusations of harm run the gamut. It'll train children to lie, to apologize, only as a formality to escape punishment. Make them, quote, less kind and less thoughtful. It'll alienate them from their feelings or shame them into never apologizing again. The points aren't necessarily wrong, but as is often the case in modern parenting debates, the stakes are much lower than they seem, and the reality is more nuanced than the influencers would have you believe. Instructing a kid to say sorry is sometimes useless, at least in a moment. It could be unnecessary depending on the child's temperament and might be harmful depending on how you go about it. When you account for the emotional complexity stirred up by conflict, you can find many feelings-informed reasons to insist an apology as an apology as not. Daria, what do you think about having kids apologize if they're not feeling it themselves?
I think it's only harmful if you actually are letting them escape punishment with an apology. Like, that's just bad parenting.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I don't think it's a bad idea, but I think it's I would caution against like blanket parenting rules because children are just so different from each other.
Yeah, and
Exactly.
I think there's something to be said for having them say it so that they learn this is how it goes, like this is how making amends goes. I'm not really sure like how you teach empathy otherwise.
Right.
Other than saying, I'll use my own kids. Okay, so Trey throws a toy at Ellis. Ellis starts crying. Trey, don't you see that you hurt Ellis? He's crying. You hurt his head. When we hurt people, we need to apologize.
Yeah.
How about you say you're sorry for hurting him or something? Like, is there another way to teach empathy?
I'm not sure. I mean, other than like a straight up guilt trip, I don't making this kid just panic and think they've like gravely harmed their their baby brother. I'm not sure that there's another way because he's 3. He doesn't have the emotional skills or the verbal processing to know this is what we do until he has been modeled it or made to do it enough that it becomes like genuine.
Right.
I think that parenting influencer who they're quoting, yes, you should feel shame. That's why you're apologizing.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't feel shame, then your apology is worthless, and you're just spouting words to, move on, check it off the list.
Yeah, they get into later in this article about the reasons a child might not apologize, even if they know that they technically should or maybe they want to. We'll get to that in just a minute. We've been talking about, there's some parenting influencers. They each have like millions of followers on Instagram, I'm pretty sure. And they talk about how forcing your kids to apologize is unnecessary and harmful. Now, personally, I think saying harmful, it's a little bit dramatic.
Yes.
I don't think it's harmful. There's many other things that are harmful to our children, and asking them to apologize, I don't think is one of them. But basically, they're saying they don't really mean it. So you're just asking them to just say something, and then over time, they're just going to become calloused, and they just apologize for no reason, and they're lying. Well, I don't think they're lying because they're not intentionally doing it because you're asking them to do it.
I'm asking this as someone who doesn't have children. Is it possible for a child that young, say Trey's age or younger, to feel genuine remorse even?
I think it develops slowly over time.
Uh-huh.
So it's usually not in the moment, because usually in the moment they feel guilt and shame for doing something wrong after you reprimand them. Lately, probably in the last, 6 months or so, Trey has usually come around later and apologized on his own.
Okay.
He's just started to do that. Sometimes it's like the next day or like several hours later. He'll be like, Mama, I'm sorry that I was so not nice earlier. I'm sorry that I was yelling earlier.
So it's not lying. It's just they might not be developmentally ready for that.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's slowly over time, and they kind of have to come to it on their own to really understand. So the author of this article, she's kind of saying, no, I don't think it's harmful and unnecessary. Her name's Stephanie from The Atlantic. She says, apologies are socially and emotionally tricky. Observing my own children, I found that what stops them from apologizing often isn't the absence of remorse, but the presence of other stronger emotions, a lingering frustration over what happened, embarrassment for publicly messing up, a vague but overblown fear of what will happen if they do apologize. This last point is for adults as well. She says, a fear of apologizing that it will feel more humiliating and stressful than it ends up being. Sometimes guilt itself seems to be the obstacle. My children feel bad for what they've done, and they want to disappear into my arms rather than call more attention to it or to themselves. In other words, the issue isn't always that kids don't feel sorry, but for a variety of reasons, they don't feel like saying so. I think I've totally felt that way. I feel so embarrassed or ashamed that I did something wrong or was called out that I don't even want to say anything.
Yeah, no, apologizing is hard even for adults.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's scary for children.
Yeah, something that has really helped me in parenting is that kids have the same emotions that we have. They're not like kid-sized emotions.
Right.
They're the same, like, large feelings that I have, just in a smaller body that doesn't know how to, understand their feelings yet.
Process it or tell you how they're feeling.
Yeah, so I can't imagine how, scary and big they feel, because it feels so much bigger in their small bodies.
And they need to learn, too, that whatever the offense was, it's kind of put a divider between you and that other person.
Yeah, that's good.
And that will be there until you remove it by apologizing.
Yep.
So if you don't apologize, it's put that awkward barrier there, and your friendship won't grow any stronger. It'll just get weaker.
I think, too, you need to model apologizing for them.
Yeah.
Like, if you and your spouse have a fight, apologize to daddy in front of them, and then apologize to your child for scaring them with the fight.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Because they have to learn it somehow. It's not just going to be they all of a sudden just feel sorry. Empathy, I think, has to be it's like a learned emotion. You have to realize, other people hurt because of the things I've done or the things I've said.
Yeah.
I think she's a psychologist that she's quoting, Godwin agreed that modeling apologies and helping children reflect on their actions are essential. But she thinks there's a place for prompting or even insisting on apologies for the simple reason that apologizing often doesn't feel good, at least not right away. Nudging a child through an apology, even one that comes out of that's clouded by their emotions, can teach them to cope with discomfort and dispel any exaggerated fears, and expose them to some of the apology's upsides, like the relief of being forgiven. Have you ever felt like such relief after apologizing?
Mm-hmm.
It just feels like I had this huge weight on my shoulders, and then you apologize, and you're like, oh, that was easy.
I love to see when I apologize for something that the other person either didn't notice or has already forgotten about, and I'm beating myself up over it.
Right.
Yeah, and then you're like, wow, I need to chill out with, beating myself up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just feels like such a weight is lifted, and kids can feel that too. So helping them, the author's saying, nudging them through apologizing, even if they didn't do it on their own or they didn't feel it on their own, helps them realize, oh, that discomfort can go away if I apologize. And the other person comes back and is like, oh, that's fine. She also talks about how kids don't really care if the apology isn't meaningful. Like us, as we talked about when we started this, kind of feel bad when someone is insincere with their apology. Kids don't really care about that.
Right.
Do they not understand subtext?
Yeah. I think it's that they're like, oh, well, it's better than nothing. At least you acknowledge something, even if you didn't really mean it.
Right.
And they also maybe aren't understanding that they're not sincere about it. So at least they said something. Yeah. So I think having our kids apologize, even if they don't mean it, helps them learn empathy and learn, for lack of a better word, the routine of apologizing.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really hate how everything is like, oh, this is damaging or traumatizing. It's like life is damaging and traumatizing.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Forcing your kid to apologize is not doing lasting damage unless you're actually not punishing them for wrong behavior and you're letting them get out scot-free on an apology.
Yeah, and like a 3-year-old doesn't know what apology means. You have to teach them.
Right.
And the only way to teach them is to show them in your own life, to model it like Daria talked about, and also to show them how the routine goes of apologizing.
Mm-hmm.
You have to show them that what it means to hurt somebody. I don't know why, but it is, I do know why. It's sin. The kids just want to take choice from other kids.
Yes.
It's just the natural thing that they do. It's their sin nature. They must snatch toys. And they don't know that that's wrong until someone teaches them that's wrong.
Right.
And that other people's feelings are involved here and hurt when you do those things.
Yeah, I think in this case, we're applying a lot of adult feelings and motivations to children that are not capable of experiencing them.
Yeah. I don't think we're realizing kids develop over time. Their feelings and emotions have to they have to learn them and develop them. They have a sin nature, but a lot of times they're not doing it purposefully. They're not sinning purposefully. They just do it.
Yeah, there's no intent behind it.
Yes, exactly. Maybe we can learn from kids too. That for asking for forgiveness and apologizing sometimes feels nice.
It does.
Makes me feel better.